Daniel Jeremiah just released his top 50 big board, and I don't necessarily agree with anything on here. We're going to talk about what I disagree with, but it is an incredibly useful data point to be checking out to try to get an idea of what NFL draft capital is going to look like for these players. Last year, you had the surprise of, oh my gosh, is Dalton Kincaid really in the same range as Michael Mayer, which nobody in the Dynasty community back last January was expecting. And then, of course, Dalton Kincaid goes as the top tight end in the NFL draft. And yeah, you're going to see some surprises on this list. Keep in mind, this is an NFL insider that is a lot more tuned in to what actually is going on in front offices in comparison to what I am or anybody watching this video. Now, starting off, number one, he does have Caleb Williams. Nothing's a big surprise here, right? If you look at Las Vegas sportsbooks, they're all essentially pricing in already. Caleb Williams is the number one overall pick. Caleb Williams is going to the Chicago Bears. I understand if you're a massive Justin Fields fan, you probably don't like to hear it, but it's the reality of the situation. I'm not a fan of the reality that Trey Lance is a backup in Dallas right now, but it's the world we're living in, and Caleb Williams will most likely be a Chicago Bear. Now, not really a big surprise either to see Marvin Harrison Jr. as the second overall player with this big board. Now, this is second overall entirely, not just fantasy relevant guys. And yeah, Marvin Harrison Jr. is most likely going to be a top 5 NFL draft pick. Now, of course, it's a little bit different to look at a big board and look at an NFL mock draft. You are going to expect that NFL teams obviously prioritize different positions over others. Wide receiver is one of the more premium positions in today's NFL, but obviously it does not hold a candle to quarterback. So just because Marvin Harrison Jr. is number 2 overall in the sport doesn't mean you should expect them to be going to Washington by any means, but it does mean you could probably expect them to be a top 5 NFL pick. Now, this is the biggest surprise that we are going to have, at least at the very top. Rome Odunze is number 3 on this big board. Going back to what we were talking about previously, this is not number 3 among fantasy relevant guys. This is number 3 overall. He says Odunze is big, athletic, wideout with exceptional hands. He can play outside or in the slot. He is refined and polished in everything he does on the field. He uses a variety of releases at the line of scrimmage and is a clean route runner. He uses his strength to lean into defenders before separating out of the break point. He thrives in traffic, possessing the ability to pluck the football and absorbs big shots over the middle of the field. He makes some incredible adjustments on poorly thrown balls. He tracks naturally over his shoulder. After the catch, he is a very tough to bring down and has some nifty make-miss ability. He plays with a ton of passion and injury. Overall, Odunze is a complete player and reminds me of Larry Fitzgerald coming out of college. Obviously, higher marks, and this does kind of reiterate for me where I have Odunze ranked. I personally have him as my wide receiver 3. I have him a clear tier ahead of any wide receiver outside of Marvin Harrison Jr. as well as Malik Newman. I understand that we've had some pessimism centered around the fact that this is a 4-year wide receiver. This is a wide receiver that wasn't particularly productive in year 2, wasn't that great in year 3. And historically speaking, obviously that's very bad for his expected hit rate. But going back to the video that we released a couple days ago, for a million different reasons, I'm willing to overlook those factors and say this is a wide receiver that was hyper productive at 21 years old in college, playing alongside other top quality wide receiver talents. And I think he is the clear wide receiver 3 in this draft class. And it will be very interesting to see if there begins to be more smoke of him going above Malik Newman in the NFL draft. That's not something I'm expecting right now, but obviously when we're talking rookies in January, early February, we are operating with limited information and a lot is going to change over the next 3 months. Now, going over to our next guy, not a big surprise. He is Drake Maye, number 4 on the big board. Drake Maye right now is being priced in as if he's the number 2 overall pick in this year's NFL draft. Obviously has the size, obviously is a little bit of rushing upside. He's going to be that top tier in Dynasty. This is what I really like to see right here. Y'all know, I want to say almost a month ago at this point, we put out the video saying Jaden Daniels is essentially in consideration as a top 3 Dynasty rookie draft pick. And I think now most people are coming around to that. I mean, back when we put out the video, most people are ranking him at about 5, maybe some people are at 6. No, this is a guy that is a top 5 NFL draft pick, more likely than not. Right now, Daniel Jeremiah has him ranked 5th on his big board, which is a massive deal in terms of projecting out his NFL draft capital. And like we said previously, this quarterback that had 1,100 rushing yards his final season at LSU. He can come into the NFL, average 50, 60 rushing yards per game. That is a possibility. And if you are a top 5 NFL draft pick, we have seen throughout all of NFL history that unless your name is Trey Lance, he is the only guy that we have never seen be given the ability to start multiple seasons as a top 5 pick, even if you're a bust, even if you're Mitchell Trubisky, even if you're Blake Bortles, and if you're Jaden Daniels and you're starting, even if you're a bust, you're probably starting for my fantasy team given your rushing upside. I mean, look at Justin Fields. Not saying he wouldn't have been better in a different situation, but he did have some of the worst passing statistics we've seen in NFL history, and he was still phenomenal in fantasy based off his rushing upside. So that's kind of the floor of what you have here with Daniels. Now, going down to 7, it's interesting to see Malik Neighbors down this low. I mean, if I'm looking at NFL mock drafts right now, a lot of people are pricing in Neighbors as if he is the locked and loaded wide receiver 2. I personally feel that way. It's just interesting to see an NFL insider feel a little differently. I would love to see Malik Neighbors go to like the Los Angeles Chargers, of course. This is the number 1 wide receiver with his PFF grade, number 1 with his yards per team pass attempt, number 1 with his yards per route run, top 5 with his targets per route run. He's also the youngest wide receiver in this draft class at only 20 years old. And he played alongside Brian Thomas Jr. So he had serious target competition. He was the most productive guy in the class and the youngest. I love him. I'm going to be taking him ahead of Rome for sure. But I am interested to see how this trends with NFL insiders over the next few months. Brock Bowers coming in at 8. With Bowers, this tight end I've seen mocked as high as the Los Angeles Chargers at 5. I've seen him as low as the Indianapolis Colts at 15. There is an interesting conversation I'm seeing happen online with tight ends going round 1 of the NFL draft, and if it really ever works out for the team that drafts them. Because a lot of times what you'll see is you'll see that great tight end prospect come in. He won't really do anything on his rookie deal, but you're setting him up to be a great player on his second contract. Go look at Evan Ingram. Go look at David Njoku. Go look at Eric Ebron. Go look at these players that were top-level prospects coming in that didn't do anything for that team on their rookie deal, and instead, they started producing when they were paid the bag with their second. So we know the NFL is very sensitive at this point to maximizing what you can get out of a player before you have to pay them that second contract. So it's just interesting to see where Bowers goes in the NFL draft, especially with what just happened with Kyle Pitts, because I know Bowers is a phenomenal prospect in his own right, but I still stand by. I think Kyle Pitts was a better prospect. I'd rather have Bowers in Dynasty at this point because Pitts has failed over the past few seasons. But if we're just comparing apples to apples, I think Kyle Pitts was better coming out of Florida. Now, going over to our next guy, this is where we really start to get some value by checking this out. Because, of course, we already know, go to flockfantasy.com, pull up our prospect rankings, whether you're looking at my rankings, Corey's rankings, Zach's rank, it doesn't matter whose rankings you're looking at. Pretty much everybody's going to have the top 7 guys in consensus on flockfantasy.com and pretty much in all your dynasty leagues, right? We know that tier exists right there. But once you get to 8, it's kind of the wild, wild west. I mean, you can talk to different people and they're all going to have a different guy at 8. However, that may change over the next few months. Daniel Jeremiah currently is Brian Thomas Jr. here. He writes, Thomas is a big explosive wideout with incredible production, including an FBS best 17 touchdown catches this past season. Keep in mind, that's playing alongside top 10 NFL draft pick Malik Neighbors as well. He lines up outside and in the slot. He easily defeats press coverage with his quickness. He's very sudden in his release and can find another gear once the ball is up in the air. He's a very loose and fluid as a route runner. He has snap at the top of the route and doesn't waste steps. He has a very large catch radius because of his frame, leaping ability, and ball skills. After the catch, he has some wiggle to make defenders miss and also boasts home run speed. Overall, Thomas is a big play machine and has the upside to develop into a number 1 wide receiver for his drafting team. Very interesting to know. I mean, if you are sitting here with the 108, kind of what you were hoping is Brian Thomas comes out and he gets this kind of NFL draft capital. He does go in the middle of round 1. He goes around pick 15. If somehow he gets closer to the top 10, that's just going to make this pick at 8 so much more valuable. And we can sit here and we can look at his production measures, say, 2.61 yards per route run, 2.86 yards per team pass attempt. But keep in mind, this is a younger player. This is an early declare. And at the same time, he played alongside Malik Newman. So it's very important to consider that when we are looking at his metrics. It's not as easy as comparing him 1-for-1 with Troy Franklin, who undoubtedly has better production profile, but played with significantly worse talents. Now, as we move over to our next guy, speaking of the Wild Wild West in our rankings, I currently have no idea how to rank Michael Penix, Bo Nix, and JJ McCarthy. I want to reiterate, I am not going to sit here and try to pretend, and I never have, that I am some expert quarterback guru scout. I don't think anybody is, to be completely honest with you, at least that's making or consuming YouTube videos, or anybody playing Dynasty Fantasy Football. I know we want to pretend, I know we like to play the game, but in reality, I think you'd be better off looking at NFL draft capital, combining that with the situation that they're stepping into, and lastly, looking at the rushing upside that that quarterback has, because if he steps into a situation where he can succeed, and he has the draft capital to guarantee his job, if he has rushing upside, he's going to put up fantasy points. Now, of course, if you check all these boxes, once a blue moon, you'll turn into Trey Lance, and it won't matter at the end of the day. But nonetheless, I don't know how to value these guys. So seeing Bo Nix here at 23 ahead of these other quarterbacks really does stand out for me, especially if you're looking at the fact that Bo Nix in school did have, a considerable amount of rushing production. Going back 2 years at Oregon, he had 510 rushing yards. He had 14 rushing touchdowns as well. So this is something that I probably need to reevaluate if NFL insiders, if the NFL dictates that Bo Nix goes ahead of these other two quarterbacks and Bo Nix had more rushing production in college. I probably will rank Bo Nix ahead of both McCarthy and Penix, which currently I do not have on flogfantasy.com. So I probably will have to update that. But of course, if you want to check out all my rankings on flogfantasy.com, not only all my rankings, but all the rankings to all your favorite creators, plus get access to our Dynasty trade calculator, plus get all of our premium content. You can find that link in the description and the comment section. If you use promo code FLOCK, you're going to get 30% off any subscription. Plus, yours truly will break down your Dynasty Fantasy Football team with the podcast. But let's move this over. Another big surprise. Devonta Walker is here at 26. He writes, Walker's a tall, long wideout with outstanding speed and hands. He missed the start of the 2023 season because the NCAA did not initially grant him eligibility to play following his transfer from Kent State. Even so, in the 8 games he did play after the NCAA cleared him, he managed to put up strong numbers, 41 receptions for about 700 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns. He is very sudden in his release and he gains ground quickly with a long gliding stride. He is at his best working on vertical routes and crossers. He uses his speed to separate and he can high point the ball with ease. He tracks the ball naturally over his shoulder. He flashes the ability to drop his weight quickly and work back to the quarterback. However, that really wasn't his role in North Carolina's offense. He is very explosive after the catch. Overall, Walker is a gifted field stretching target and should be ready to impact his NFL team immediately. So going back to what I was talking about previously, if you're looking at how we are ranking these guys right now, Walker is someone that I have much, much lower than this. Like if I'm going through, if I am just pulling up the metrics that I try to key in on, obviously these are more so production metrics. We are going to combine this with NFL draft capital to try to get a better sense of what we are going to have when it comes to film grades. But nonetheless, he's a 68.3 PFF grade. That's second last in this class. 21.6 targets per route run, which was 21st. Now, of course, he's very efficient. He's a field stretcher, so he could very easily be someone that goes higher in the NFL draft than you should expect from a fantasy perspective, because maybe he's just a better NFL player with his field stretching ability than a typical wide receiver that's going to command a lot of volume. But if he does go round 1 in the NFL draft, right now I have him wide receiver 14 in my rankings. Obviously, we'll have to move much higher than that. Now, JJ McCarthy, our next guy here, 27, so essentially priced in as that low round 1 pick, right? In a similar line to Bo Nix. Adonai Mitchell here at 34. This isn't going to be a big change compared to where most NFL mock drafters have Adonai right now. If you look at NFL mock draft database, there he's currently at 35. So this is right in line with what we are expecting. Now he has Keon Coleman at 38, which is interesting to see because we've been basing Keon's ranking off of the assumption he does get round 1 NFL draft capital. NFL mock draft database, he's currently at 21. I don't necessarily like his profile. He's 24th with his PFF grade, 23rd with his yards per route run. Now keep in mind, he did have some serious target competition here with Johnny Wilson. And at the same time, this is someone that's only going to be 20 years old at the time of the NFL draft. So we can say he had competition. He was much younger than Johnny Wilson and just very young in general. So maybe we place a premium on his production in comparison, especially if he goes round 1 of the NFL draft, where NFL talent evaluators are confident in his ability to make an impact early. However, if that's not the case, if he does fall behind some of these other wide receivers that he's maybe not being projected to go behind right now, then I would be much more confident with us ranking him behind consensus, just given the fact that, like I said, I don't really love his production profile. He's ranked back-to-back here with Troy Franklin. I would much prefer Troy Franklin, to be completely honest with you. I mean, with Franklin, you have Daniel Jeremiah with him at 39. NFL mock draft database has him at 30, so not too big of a change here. I mean, you're going to get that early round 2, late round 1 NFL draft capital, or at least you should. This is someone that's going to blow up the NFL combine, and I'm sure it's going to get a little more buzz in about a month. But Michael Penix coming in here at 40, so it's interesting to see that he has Penix as the last quarterback among the big 3. Keep in mind, Penix also extremely old and has 3 wide receivers that he was throwing to last year getting drafted in the NFL draft this season. Now, Jatavion Sanders in year 41, not too big of a surprise, right? Projected out to be a mid-second round pick. Not projected to be anything close to what you have with a Brock Bowers level player, but maybe could be like a Michael Mayer level prospect. Xavier Worthy here at 43. What I'm a little bit worried about with Worthy is it just screams Marvin Mims. I know I bring this up literally every single time, but especially if he goes behind someone like Adonai Mitchell in the NFL draft, because the NFL is going to prioritize speed with their field stretching ability, right? I mean, we were going right back to what we were talking about with Walker, saying that, oh, okay, maybe the NFL takes him a little bit earlier than we would, considering the fact that he has that speed. But if Xavier Worthy goes this late in comparison to the other wide receivers with the speed that he has, definitely not a good mark. Of course, I just want to say hook 'em horns. I like my guy, but hopefully he goes higher than this. Ladd McConkey coming in here at 44. Wide receiver that should be ready to make an impact immediately, right? I mean, if you are looking at this, it's a wide receiver that a lot of people are very excited about at the Senior Bowl, blah, blah, blah. I know he has good route running. I am very concerned if you look at the production profile, it kind of screams Jonathan Mingo and that he was never really productive at Georgia. We are just being sold on his film. We are just being sold on, trust me, looks good on paper. I mean, not paper. He looks good on film, which 100% can be something that we take into account, especially if he does go round 1 in the NFL draft. Here he's projected to go mid round 2. It is difficult, however, to look at his production, knowing that he only ran 148 routes last year, right? So it is more so a black box player that is going to come down to your film analysis and what you believe with him, just because we don't have that large sample. And then Malachi Corley, right in line with expectations. He has him at 50, so that mid-second round player. I like the production profile, but obviously when you're playing at Western Kentucky in comparison to a school like Georgia, it's going to be a lot easier to put up stats. But I think that's all I have for y'all with this video. I really hope that y'all enjoyed this. Of course, I want to thank Daniel Jeremiah for putting this out here every single year for us. But if y'all enjoyed it, hit that like button, subscribe, play Dynasty Fantasy Football. And if you wanted to check out my Dynasty Fantasy Football rankings, our Dynasty Trade Calculator that takes into account your exact league settings so we can make the most accurate trade calculator on the planet. And on top of that, if you want to get your team broken down by yours truly in a podcast, you can find that on flogfantasy.com. Code FLOG is going to get you 30% off any subscription, a free week trial, and yours truly breaking down your team. But I think that's all I have for you. Really do appreciate you and really hope we get to see you out with the video tomorrow.